Megavanen, friends. So, what if Gandalf was never reborn? Short answer first, but not the whole story. If Gandalf is never reborn, the West still fights, but the rhythm that keeps courage on time goes missing. The mountains don't fall, the minutes do. That's the shape of our answer, unfinished on purpose, because the real damage here isn't one lost duel. It's a dozen small victories that arrive 5 minutes late. We start at the bridge and in the abyss, shadow and flame, the Balrog plunging like a thunderhead through stone, Gandalf after it, and then the silence beneath the world. In the book he returns, "Naked I was sent back, until my task is done." In this branch, that door never opens. No white cloak, no new staff, no voice that turns a cobwebbed hall into a war room. A few problems to set the stakes. First, a kingdom that needs waking. Meduseld without a thunderclap is a long meeting with no action items. Second, a siege that needs dawn. Helm's Deep without a timed return is a storm with a weather break. Third, a city that needs a lifeguard. Who talks a steward down when a seeing stone has taught him despair that sounds like logic? Fourth, a gate that needs words like walls. Sometimes a single rider at a single door buys the only currency that matters, time. Fifth, a war that runs on synchronization. The quest doesn't need grand speeches. It needs the right distractions at the right hour, so 2 very small travelers can cross a very large map. There's another fork we wonder about. If Saruman had stayed as he was meant to, orderly, wise, intact, would there even be a need for Gandalf the White? It's a tidy thought, and we'll test it. But the text stacks the pieces differently, and that too is part of the puzzle. Tonight on Fool of a Tube, we'll track important pressure points without turning the whole map over. The fall below Khazad-dûm, and why Sent Back matters. Rohan's wake-up call, or lack of one. The timing at Helm's Deep, Isengard after the flood, and what a formal "you're fired" actually changes. Minas Tirith's morale math, and the gate that might hold or not. The paths of the dead, and the problem of getting strong-willed captains to agree on walking toward the Black Gate, and the thin thread of distraction and delay that keeps the eye looking the wrong way long enough for the right thing to happen. So, you better fasten your cloaks. We're not rewriting the legend, just tilting a single hinge and watching what it shakes. Let's step into the tale when the wizard doesn't return. We begin where breath turns to steam and stone falls like rain, Gandalf and Durin's bane, tumbling through the dark beneath Khazad-dûm. In the canon, that plunge ends in fire and frost, then a remaking, "Naked I was sent back, until my task is done." Tolkien later spells out that this sending back is a one-off Eru Ilúvatar intervention, outside the Valar's normal hands-off policy for the affairs of Middle-earth. In our timeline, that door doesn't open. The grey doesn't return as the white. The staff that breaks Saruman's, the voice that wakes a king, the hand that snatches a steward from a funeral pyre, none of it happens. The ripples are immediate, and they do not stay polite. Without the White Rider, Rohan lingers in a fog. In the book, Gandalf walks into Meduseld like a thunderclap, shattering Grima's spell with a few sharp sentences. Your fingers would remember their old strength better if they grasped a sword hilt. Strip that scene away, and you still have a good king, but one whose will is muffled. Theoden wakes later, slower or only halfway. Wormtongue's line management of despair keeps bumping decisions down the calendar. Riders muster in drips, not surges. Eomer's courage is still there, but the state machine around him stalls. Is that survivable? Maybe. But every day lost is a gift to Isengard. Now take away the most cinematic beat of all. In Tolkien's text, Erkenbrand arrives at dawn with the Westfold men, with Gandalf, to break the siege of the Hornburg. Film fans will remember Éomer filling that role. The Huorns seal the route. Change one variable, no white to go fetch Erkenbrand, to time the return, to hold the morale line, and Helm's Deep becomes a coin toss, flipped in a hurricane. The Rohirrim can still fight like the sea goes to war, but the timing that makes the relief feel like sunrise? Gone. We're left with three plausible outcomes. The deep falls, the deep holds at catastrophic cost, or a late-breaking Ent factor bails the West out. Too late to save most of the garrison. However you slice it, Rohan emerges smaller and shakier, losses at the deep, plus scattered musters, with fewer spears and more ghosts. Yes, the Ents still march. Merry and Pippin still wheel Treebeard into anger, and Orthunk's Ring of Pits still drowns under sudden rivers. But post-siege, a specific piece of wizardly HR is missing. In canon, Gandalf the White convenes a board meeting on the front steps of Orthanc and terminates Saruman's employment. Your staff is broken. Without Gandalf, no one can actually strip Saruman of his office among the Astari. He remains a humiliated CEO with no factory, but still wearing the badge. That matters. Even if his armies are mulch, his voice remains potent, and he retains the social capital of being one of the five to whisper poison wherever poison finds ears. Rohan and Gondor still have a Palantir problem. An undeposed Saruman is a Palantir problem with a podcast. Minas Tirith has a day job, not panicking. Denethor, who stares into a seeing stone too long, needs someone in the building who can recognize despair dressed as logic. In the book, Gandalf does this job, and often he does it with a single sentence that appears simple but lands like healing. The rule of no realm is mine, for I also am a steward. In our world, that stabilizer never walks through the door. Now add two practical logistics that spin off from that absence. First, Pippin. Gandalf brings him to Minas Tirith, partly to keep him from mischief, partly because, well, Pippin's brand of mischief saves lives. No Gandalf, likely no Pippin in the tower to swear himself a guard under Beregond. Second, Faramir's pyre. In canon, it is Gandalf, plus Beregond, who stop the burning and drag Faramir out of the flames. In our branch, the variables align grimly. A despairing Denethor with no countervoice, no Gandalf to countermand, no Pippin to fetch Beregond in time. Result: Faramir dies, and the city loses its conscience on the very morning it most needs one. The Witch King's approach to the Great Gate is a ritual of dread, banners, drums, and the will that makes strong men numb. In the book, Gandalf rides out and throws a wall into the air with words, "You cannot enter here." That stand buys moments, moments that are breath and order, and the difference between a defense and a rout. Remove him and the equation tips. The Lord of the Nazgul may force the entrance earlier, slashing through command and control before the horns of Rohan answer. Éowyn and Merry can still deliver destiny upon the Pelennor. The prophecy is bigger than a scheduling conflict, but the city may already be bleeding from a wound at the gate that Gandalf would have kept closed. Aragorn does not require Gandalf to claim the paths of the dead. That choice springs from prophecy and lineage, with Elrond's sons and the Grey Company at his side. The Oathbreakers still march, the Corsairs still learn humility, and the Black Fleet can still arrive like a punchline. What changes is the sail's job to the west. The last debate, the decision to draw Sauron's eye by marching on the Black Gate, has a large Gandalf-shaped hole. Without him, Aragorn's case still makes sense, but consensus costs rise. No Denethor, gone. No Faramir, in this branch, dead. And no White Rider to herd strong-willed captains toward a suicidal gambit dressed as strategy. They might still go. They might go slower, they might go smaller, but every uncertainty helps Sauron. On the surface, Gandalf's absence is greatest in the west. In truth, his absence makes Mordor colder too. Frodo's courage does not derive from wizardly pep talks, but Gandalf's early counsel is ballast. He gives the Fellowship its philosophy, mercy for Gollum, patience with the ways of fate. My heart tells me that he has some part to play yet, for good or ill. In our branch, Frodo and Sam still trudge, still trust the wrong guide until the trust becomes the right betrayal, still stagger to Mount Doom. The crucial change is timing. Without the White coordinating the West's distractions with surgical cruelty, Sauron's attention may return to the East a hair too soon. A hair in this world can weigh as much as a mountain. If the eye pivots back to Mordor, while two small shadows crawl up an ashen slope, soldiers on an inner road will happen to be marching there now, instead of a little later. The ring falls to doom in the original, not because the West wins fights, but because the West buys minutes. No White Rider, fewer minutes bought. What if Saruman remained as he was intended, so there would be no need for Gandalf's return as the White? On paper, that's tidy. The Astari were sent to advise and encourage the Free Peoples, not to crush Sauron by wizardly force. Unfinished tales, the Astari. A faithful Saruman the White could have served as the visible coordinator, rousing kings, setting timetables, staying out of domination. In that extreme hypothetical, Gandalf's non-return would be less disastrous because the Order would still have a White fulfilling its brief. But Tolkien's apparatus in The Lord of the Rings has already ruled this out. Saruman has fallen by the time Gandalf is sent back. The vacancy at White is why the remaking happens. Our branch keeps that vacancy open, so all the jobs Saruman should have done, and Gandalf did, now go undone by anyone with equivalent authority. War isn't always won by killing more. Sometimes it's won by making courage late. Gandalf's returns at Edoras, Helm's Deep, Minas Tirith are carefully placed to front-load courage at the exact second it must be free. In our world, courage shows up 5 minutes after the calendar asked for it. That is enough for a black captain to push through a gate, enough for a steward to burn instead of bend, enough for a king to lift his sword too late to rally all the men behind him. The Witch King does not suddenly become invincible. He simply gets more done before fate finds him. Elrond framed the quest simply at the council. We cannot use the ring. It is altogether evil. Gandalf spent the next year enforcing that simplicity in every complicated moment, refusing shortcuts, choosing diversions, refusing to replace hope with control. Remove him, and the West still tries to act on Elrond's line. But frayed, exhausted leaders make bargains with speed. A few temporary measures stick. A few necessary harshnesses dull the sharp edge of friendship between lands. In a long war scenario, Sauron counts these notches and smiles. Do the Ents still rise without Gandalf? Yes. Merry and Pippin are enough kindling to light that ancient wood. But without the White's orchestration, the sequencing changes. The battle at Isengard might have still been won, yet the follow-through is weaker. No formal deposition means Saruman's voice retains more pull with men who want to be persuaded. The Sharky endgame in the Shire still arguably occurs, a small dark poetry Tolkien allows, but his prestige may lengthen his reach. No staff was a legal and spiritual end to a career. Keep the badge clipped on and he can badger more ears for longer. Late in the tale, the line that crowns Aragorn is not a fanfare but a touch. The hands of the king are the hands of a healer. It is Gandalf who says it aloud in the houses and then leads the wounded to Athelas. In our branch, if Faramir has died, if Éowyn and Merry survive but shiver longer in shadow, then the king still heals. But the symbolic handoff from wizard steward to rightful king doesn't happen in public. The morale dividends that scene pays, rangers bowing without being told to, the city seeing not a warlord, but a healer, never hit the ledger. A small thing? Only if you've never watched a nation decide whether to trust a crown. If you're into these what-if stress tests of Middle-earth, subscribe to Fool of a Tube for deep dives with maps, quotes, and the occasional meme. Okay, back to the white that never came. A little levity, because we need it. Without Gandalf the White, the "you shall not pass" meme becomes a network admin's sad joke. The Balrog passed. At Helm's Deep, the caption reads, "Look to my coming at first light on the 5th day." Scene. Typing. Status. Message failed to send. In Minas Tirith, a steward sets his status to away, leaves a final message. Do not disturb. Eternally. We laugh because it hurts. We keep the jokes short because the stakes are not. 1. The slow victory that feels like defeat. Frodo and Sam still succeed. Gollum still falls with the ring. Mount Doom still answers with thunder. But the price is cruel. Faramir dead, Rohan gutted at Helm's Deep, Minas Tirith scarred from a gate breached. Aragorn's reign begins with rebuilding, not rejoicing. Saruman, never formally cast from the Order, wanders longer, whispering more, poisoning small towns far from the king's touch. The West wins the metaphysical war, but loses a chunk of its soul on the road. 2. The draw that Sauron almost turns into a win. The Blackgate diversion gathers fewer men. The Eye divides its attention more efficiently. Mordor deploys an extra regiment onto the roads by accident that is actually inevitability. Frodo is spotted too soon. He is not captured. Sam is a wall, but forced off the timetable. When Gollum's hand finally closes, the Eye is already looking. The ring falls. So do many men who would have lived in the first branch. Victory arrives late and bloodier, with a rumor that it almost didn't. 3. The failure that becomes a long night. In the darkest branch, Helm's Deep falls, Faramir burns, the gate breaks, and Éowyn and Merry still fell the Witch King, but after he does enough damage to make the Rohirrim's charge too late to save the city. Aragorn still raises the dead, still seizes the ships, still comes, but he comes to ash. The last debate never happens. There is no one left to debate. Frodo and Sam are caught. The ring's tale ends not in fire, but in a tower where hands that once were kings claim it. Tolkien's own safety rail, letter 246, warns that no mortal could withstand Sauron in person. In this branch, no one must. Mordor wins by timing, not theology. Tolkien's world ties means to ends with stubborn thread. The Astari are constrained because domination, however tidy, corrupts the very victory it delivers. Gandalf's return as the White doesn't violate that brief. It reinforces it. He doesn't rule, he releases. He doesn't conquer, he coordinates. Strip him out, and we discover how much of the War of the Ring is synchronization. Putting the right courage in the right place, just in time. Ents still march without him. Kings still lift swords. Halflings still walk. But the hard part of winning is timing joyful sacrifices, so they add instead of cancel. Gandalf is the metronome. Without him, the orchestra still plays. The notes are right, but the music doesn't land when it must. Tolkien kept a place for luck with a name. Call it providence, call it fate. Gandalf's sending back is one of the few times that hand is visible. Removing it does not remove providence, it removes a conduit. Fate still nudges Gollum at the cracks. Fate can still whisper to Treebeard that orcs are bad for rivers. But in this world, providence does less with timing and more with aftercare. It can still heal. It just cannot catch as many falling people in the moment. When readers say, Gandalf didn't do the winning, they're right. Frodo, Sam, Éowyn, Merry, Aragorn, Faramir, Theoden, Treebeard, Éomer. That list is the heart of how evil is undone. But remove the white, and the margins for all of them shrink. The West doesn't lose its virtues, it loses its timing window. And evil, in Tolkien's arithmetic, is nothing if not a master of deadlines. Without the rebirth, our best people still rise. They simply arrive late to the same battles. Sometimes late is a story, sometimes late is a tomb. Without Gandalf the White, courage shows up late. Rohan wakes slower. Minas Tirith bleeds longer. Saruman whispers farther. Different branches, same lesson. The mountains don't fall, the minutes do. Thanks for walking this dark fork with Fool of a Tube. Your company steadies the lantern. Tell us in the comments which hinge you think mattered most. Edoras, Helm's Deep, or the Gate, and which ending you'd wager your last lembas on. And if you've got a fresh what if for Middle-earth, drop it below. We keep a list longer than an Entish greeting. If this episode made you glance twice at your Palantir, unplug it, there's more map to unfold. Next time, we'll pry open another quiet moment and see how loud it can get. Until then, keep your cloaks fastened, your courage handy, and your second breakfast within reach.